just going to give you a quick demo today on mixing lime mortar and also how I do the pointing in the old stone walls. So I'll give you a quick demo on that. So first thing I want to say is lime. It's actually really easy to mix, pretty much the same as concrete. So originally the lime that they used would have been in its raw form, and when you mix it with water it would have heated up and it would have smoked and it had been quite toxic. So now the lime that you can buy in the shops is lime NHL 3.5, and that's just a more stable product. So it's not quite raw, there's other additives in it, but it still allows the walls to breathe and you can use it pretty much the same as you do concrete. So I use 4-to-1 mix. So I use 1 part lime, so 1 shovel lime, and then 4 parts sand. That seems to work out pretty well. It's strong enough. You could do 3-to-1 if you wanted it a bit more brittle, or you could do 5-to-1 if you wanted it a little bit softer. So one thing to bear in mind with the lime is, depending on what sand you use and what ratio you use, depends on what colour it's going to turn out. So if you want it really white, you do a 3-to-1. If you wanted it a bit more sandy, you do a 5-to-1 or 4-to-1. I tend to buy quite white sand. So instead of the sort of yellow builder sand, I specifically buy white. Always use the extra fine sand if you can, so a 0 to 2 millimeter. So the white just gives a really nice colour and textured finish. Start mixing now, doing a 4-to-1 mix. What I find works for me is if we mix all the ingredients dry first and then just add a little bit of water to wet it down, because you want the mix relatively dry so it doesn't stain the stones, and so it can be pushed in really hard. Whereas if you have quite a sloppy mix, I see a lot of people do it with a piping bag or something like that, you risk staining the stones white with the lime, and also it doesn't really get in there. So let's start mixing that. A 4-to-1 mix. Mix just for the purpose of the video. So it's 1 lime in dry, and 1, 2, 3, 4 sand. So just let that mix up dry in there, and then we'll just start adding a tiny bit of water, and I'll show you what consistency works best for me. Don't add it all at once, just a little at a time, and keep checking. So this is consistency we're looking for. Relatively dry, but it's all mixed, so not wet, not sloppy. Just like that. These are a few things that I use. So I've got a spray bottle filled with water, and that's just to dampen all the joints, because all these are really dry. As soon as you put a drier mix in, it'll just suck it up and it won't really stick in, so we want to wet the joints. A dry brush, because we're using a dry mix, we can clean off the face of the stones as we go. I use this little trowel to push it in. Really, it depends on the width between your stones. You can use a slightly bigger trowel, or if you want to go for a different effect, you can use a really wide trowel and get it quite flat. And then either a board to hold your mortar on, or I just use this little trowel here. So, as you can see, I've cleaned out all these joints. Highly recommend a compressor and a pneumatic chisel, but if you want to scrape it out by hand or whatever, whatever works. It might just take a little bit longer. So I've cleaned out all these. You don't need to take it far, keep taking it right back, just a couple of centimeters so it sticks in. And I'm just going to go through and just wet these joints. You can spray the whole thing with water, but again, when we're thinking about keeping the face of the stones nice and clean, it's better to just wet where you're putting the mortar, really. So there we are, that's that. Doesn't need to be soaking. And just going to start putting it in. So as you can see, I've got my mortar on here. Push it right up to the joint. And we're literally just, as hard as we can, forcing it in between the stones. Doesn't matter if some drops on the floor. Just like that. And it does take a while. Probably in a day you'll only get 2 square meters done, if that. You know, it does take quite a while. So just work your way along. Not too close. At this stage you really don't have to be too neat. You're just getting it in there. Making sure it's all pushed. And that's what I was saying about if your mix is too sloppy, you can't really push it hard and make contact with the back. Because as well as looking nice, it's also to stabilise the wall as well. So that you want the lime to be doing its job. Just by having this little platform to just scoop it off of, it just makes it so much easier. So, at this stage, obviously it looks quite messy because you've just put it in. So depending on if you're doing it inside or outside or how wet your mix is, you might need to wait a little bit for the lime to get stiff enough for you to brush it off without it smudging all over the stones. Because I've made this quite dry, I should pretty much be able to do it as I go. So I've just got a dry paintbrush here. You can use, some people, you know, if you left this a day, you could use a really fine wire brush to get it off. But this works for me. So all I'm doing now, just clean all this excess off with a dry brush. And as you can see, it's not smudging. It's just taking all that off. So already it's looking better. There we go. So it's as simple as that. And now what I personally like to do, just to finish it off nicely and make sure it's smooth, is I'll just wet this down a little bit, and then just in the joints I'll just smooth it out like that. This is, you don't need to do this, this is just something I like to do, but it just sort of seals that edge around the stones so you don't brush the stones with the white. This makes it all look a little bit smoother. Again, it's something, you know, depending on how the finish you want or what your particular style of pointing is. Everyone kind of has their own style, you know, and how you finish it. So it's as easy as that, really. So there we are. So that's a small section pointed. So that's kind of, you know, what it looks like before when it's chiseled out, and then that's nice and pointed. So here's a bigger section that I did the other day. It's had time to dry now. So it looks a lot better. It's really an effective look, and it's good for the wall as well. That's it really, it's as easy as that. All it takes is just time and patience, because it is really boring. The lime itself could take a good couple of weeks to really fully set. You know, probably a day after it'll still be supple, and the day after that you'll still be able to scratch it away. So it'll just get harder and harder and harder over time. So and that's it. So I hope you enjoyed watching this little demo. I'm no expert by any means, but you know, I've done a lot of this sort of stuff. So if you guys would like to see more videos, subscribe to this one, and let me know in the comments what you think. Thanks for watching.